Hey, welcome to Live with Lynn. So if you're here, say hi. If you're watching the replay, be sure to type replay so I know you were here. I'm Lynn Huber, and I appreciate you being here. So today I'm going to talk about what are personal boundaries and why we need them. You've probably heard the phrase before, but maybe you're not sure what that means, personal boundaries. I mean, just what are personal boundaries and what difference do they make in your life? Well, first, to understand a personal boundary, we have to know what it is, right? So I looked it up in the dictionary. So boundary, which is a noun, says a line that marks the limits of an area, a dividing line. So most boundaries are pretty easy to see. You know, like the world is full of fences and dividers, clearly marking off space, right? A personal boundary does the same thing, but it's only more invisible and it's on an internal level. It's inside. It's in here and here, right? So, so let's look at this a little closer. So a boundary tells you what your responsibility is in a given situation. So you already have some boundaries, like if you work in a job, you know, at work, you have boundaries at your job. These are the parameters of your job, and they're usually marked out pretty clearly when you took the job. You were told this is what you're expected, right? On a personal level, a boundary tells you who you're responsible for. Yourself, of course, but you might also be a caregiver, a mom, a wife. You know, you have all these other things that you have also have boundaries, right? And but what about other boundaries or other responsibilities, such as paying your bills and taking care of your pets? Those are also included in the boundaries. Those are included in what your responsibility is. Okay, so next, a boundary keeps you safe. So many of these should go without saying. You know, like a boundary might be don't drink and drive, right? And you know, don't do something that's going to get yourself killed, right? But sometimes you have to set boundaries for yourself, like whether it's whether or not it's healthy to be in a relationship with a certain person, you know, or whether you should be friends with that person or whatever. Those are boundaries that you need to set. So a boundary tells us who we are. It could also tell us that, you know, are you a good person? Are you a bad person? Are you a selfish person, a pious one? You know, our moral code becomes the boundary that defines us too. There's so many things, right? Boundary clarifies your needs. What things need to be in place in your life for you to be happiest and healthiest? You know, what protects you from overwork or abuse? Those are boundaries that protect you, whether they're in your job, whether they're in your relationships. But especially in relationships, a boundary can define those relationships. So like, what are the parameters of your relationship? Is that healthy? What's your responsibility to that other person? And how are they responsible to you? So obviously, with all of that, it makes sense that having good boundaries is a good idea. You know, so many times we assume that people will respect our boundaries because we were brought up and taught what is acceptable by our family or by our culture that we grew up in, right? And unfortunately, this is not always the case. Although we can choose who we interact with in our personal life, like choosing our close friends, this isn't always the case in other environments such as work or family or community. Sometimes we can't choose who we work with, right? And sometimes we can feel really uncomfortable or even violated if we interact with those who have poor boundaries. So often we know that our boundaries have been violated by the way we feel. Like we might feel confused or angry or anxiety, or maybe just even when we're around a person, we feel really drained. Those can all be signs that our boundaries have been violated. Narcissists are notorious for violating boundaries, and this behavior seems to be increasing in our culture. I believe severe narcissism is more of a psychological problem, but again, it doesn't matter. They still interfere. They can still violate your boundaries, right? So it's important to know how to establish healthy emotional, psychological, and physical boundaries in relationships so that we can feel respected and safe. The first step is knowing your rights for a healthy relationship. Do you know what your rights are in a healthy relationship? Well, to feel safe in that relationship, to have your privacy and your boundaries that you've created respected, to be heard and listened to feel validated, to be appreciated and valued, to respect that the answer no means no, right? No. To have your needs met, to be treated respectfully, without any emotional, physical, or verbal abuse. So those are some things that you really have the right to. And so you need to identify your limits in the relationship, because that's your first step in maintaining those healthy boundaries. What is acceptable behavior within that relationship? So for example, let's say you meet a new friend and you tell your friend that you're busy right now, you can't talk right now, but they continue to call and text you. And you may find that they're not accepting no for an answer. They're pushing themselves on you right from the get-go. And a person who continually doesn't take no for an answer, they're violating your boundaries. So the second step is to stick to those boundaries and have a plan for if someone crosses those limits. So for example, if a person presses those limits, establishing consequences is critical. So you might even, if it's that person that just keeps calling and texting you, even though you're telling them, I don't have time right now, I'm busy, you might have to block them if they continue to do that. You might not have a choice, if it becomes too much. I know that's really dramatic, but if it becomes too much, you might have to block them. They're obviously not accepting no, they're not listening to what's important to you, right? But often those who lack the assertiveness skills, those of us who are afraid to say no and hold those boundaries, those of us that don't want to be mean, we're really more at risk for boundary violations because we don't want to hurt somebody's feelings and put their needs on the back burner. So we do that. We put our own needs on the back burner sometimes because we don't want to hurt someone else's feelings. But it's important to set your boundaries and hold to them. If someone is seriously intruding on your boundaries, you have to hold the line. It's important. It's critical. So, and it's really important to your self-development too. It's important to you becoming better, right? It's because you set those boundaries, you know who you are, you know what's important to you, and now you can move forward and while holding those boundaries, right? So, boundaries they're important to your personal development, especially when you take into consideration these facts. So boundaries give you a better idea of who you are. They help others to understand your needs. They give guidelines in your relationships. They make for healthy interactions with other people. And perhaps most of all, they're an integral part of your self-care. Boundaries need to be revisited occasionally and reevaluated because as we grow and we change, our boundaries will change as well. We become more, we grow, we become stronger, and then we reevaluate our boundaries and we move them if need be, right? Or we reset them. And so with all this at stake, it's no wonder we give boundaries such a lot of attention. They're important, right? They can mean the difference between a happy and healthy life and a life of drudgery and resentment. If you're married to someone who is constantly abusive to you or who's breaking those boundaries, you could be miserable, right? So it's time to learn where to draw the line. Obviously, I can't tell you where to draw the line. You have to decide that for yourself. But now it's time to learn to draw the line, and that will make you so much better as a result. So, hey, now I'd love to hear from you. Are boundaries easy for you or hard for you to maintain? What kinds of things help you to hold on to your boundaries and maintain them and be strong about them? So please get down in the comments and share your thoughts. I would love to hear your stories. So thank you for being here. If you're here with me live, and if you're watching the replay, thank you. I appreciate you. Have a great day, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.